The alien fleet hovered in the dark, empty space above an old, forgotten planet. It was a place once known for its rich history, but now it was just a lifeless rock. For the aliens, it was nothing more than a small dot on their map. But today, they had come to look for something important. They had been hunting for relics, ancient pieces of technology from lost civilizations. And on this planet, they had found something. The crew of the alien ship approached the target. Their commander, a tall alien named Zoreth, stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the planet below. His species had conquered many worlds, and they were the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had no fear. Nothing could challenge them. Not anymore. "Commander, we've located the object," said one of the crew members, pointing at the display in front of them. On the screen, a massive broken ship was visible. It looked ancient, covered in layers of dust and debris. Zoreth raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Zoreth asked, his voice filled with disinterest. He wasn't impressed. He'd seen countless ruins before, most of them useless. Another old piece of junk, no doubt. "It appears to be a human warship, sir," the crew member replied. There was a pause. Zoreth's expression hardened. "Humans, you're telling me this is one of their ships?" He let out a dry laugh. How pathetic. The rest of the crew, aliens from different planets, joined in. Their laughter echoed through the ship. The humans had long been wiped out, their once great empire destroyed. The alien empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries, and humans were just a distant memory, a forgotten race. To these aliens, the idea of a human ship was laughable. "I didn't think humans could even build ships like that," said another alien, snickering. "It looks like it could barely fly." Zoreth smirked. The humans were nothing. Their technology was outdated, their ships slow and weak. They couldn't even survive the wars they started. His words were filled with cold amusement. He turned back to the screen. The human warship was a giant, but it looked old, like it had been abandoned for years. Its metal was rusted, and some parts were missing entirely. It looked like something from a time long gone, a time when humans were still fighting their wars with primitive technology. "The relic is no threat to us," Zoreth said, waving his hand dismissively. "Let's just take it apart and see what we can learn from it. I'm sure there's nothing useful here." The crew agreed, their voices full of confidence. They had no reason to believe that this old ship could hold any power. After all, they had conquered whole planets, destroyed entire species. How could something as old and weak as a human warship be a threat? "Prepare to land," Zoreth commanded, his voice cold and steady. The alien ship descended toward the planet's surface, the massive warship following close behind. The crew was eager to explore the relic. They would take what they could and move on to their next conquest. The ship was just another piece of history, nothing more. As they touched down on the planet, Zoreth led his team out of the ship. They moved toward the massive human warship, the ground crunching under their boots. The ship stood tall in front of them, a reminder of a time when humans had been powerful. But now, it was a forgotten piece of the past. Zoreth's team spread out, examining the wreckage. Some were focused on the ship's hull, looking for weaknesses. Others were inside, searching for anything that might still be functional. But as they moved, there was one thing they couldn't ignore: the silence. The air was still. It was almost as if the ship itself was waiting, holding its breath. "It's so quiet," one alien muttered, as they peered inside the warship. Zoreth didn't answer. He was too busy looking at the ship's markings. The words were strange, and he couldn't understand them. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that the humans were gone. And this ship, whatever it was, could never stand up to the power of his empire. The laughter continued. The aliens joked and mocked the old ship, not even considering the possibility that it might hold something more. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. They were laughing at the wrong thing. The alien crew was still laughing when they began to explore the interior of the old human warship. They had seen many wrecks over the years, but this one felt different. There was something about it that made them uneasy, though none of them would admit it. They chalked it up to the strange silence of the place. After all, the ship had been abandoned for hundreds of years. There was nothing to fear from something so old. Zorath led the group as they moved deeper into the ship. His boots echoed in the long, empty corridors. The walls were scratched, covered in dust, and peeling in some places. Time had not been kind to this ship. The metal was rusted, and parts of the hallways had collapsed. The air smelled stale, like it hadn't been breathed in for ages. Still, Zorath wasn't worried. To him, this was just another dead ship, a relic from a forgotten war. "Look at this," one of the crew members said, pointing to a massive broken control panel. The buttons were cracked, the lights dim. It looked like it hadn't worked in decades. The alien pushed a button, expecting it to do nothing, but when he did, the screen flickered. For a moment, it seemed like the ship might come to life, but nothing happened. "I told you," Zorath said, walking over to the control panel. "It's nothing but junk." He waved a hand dismissively. The crew laughed again, their voices filling the empty space. They felt safe here. The ship had no power, no life. There was no way it could pose any danger. But Zorath didn't know that this ship had a secret it had been hiding for centuries. Deep within the heart of the warship, hidden from the alien crew, the ship's core was still intact. The power systems were ancient, but they were still functioning. The ship had been dormant for so long, no one had bothered to turn it off completely. The technology inside it was far older than anything the aliens had ever seen, and even though the ship was covered in dust and rust, it was not as weak as it appeared. The AI system, which had been silent for years, was waiting for a signal that would wake it up, a signal from someone who knew how to use it, and that signal was about to come. As Zorath and his crew continued to explore, they moved toward the center of the ship. It was there that they found the heart of the warship, a massive engine room, filled with pipes, wires, and old machines. At the center of the room was the ship's core. It was a huge, glowing orb, surrounded by a web of metal and technology. The alien crew members stared at it in awe. "This must be the power source," one of the crew members said, examining the orb. "I've never seen anything like it." Zorath stepped forward, eyeing the core with interest. "It's impressive, I'll give them that," he said, his voice low. "But it's useless now. This thing is ancient." Despite his words, there was something in Zorath's gut telling him to be careful. This ship wasn't just an old wreck. There was something about it, something he couldn't put his finger on. The alien commander didn't believe in superstitions, but the silence of the ship was beginning to feel unnatural. He turned to his crew. "We'll take what we can from this place and move on. There's nothing here that can harm us." But one of the crew members, a young alien named Lyra, wasn't so sure. She had been quietly observing the ship's core for a while now. It wasn't just the orb that caught her attention. It was the strange hum she could feel in the air, almost like the ship was alive. "Commander," Lyra said hesitantly, "I think we should be careful. There's something different about this ship." Zorath rolled his eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. It's just a ship. A dead ship." But Lyra didn't back down. "I don't know, Commander. There's a power here. Something. Waiting." Zorath ignored her warnings. He had never been one to listen to his crew when it came to fear. He turned away, signaling for them to continue their search. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling. Something in the back of her mind told her that the ship was far more than just a relic. As the crew moved deeper into the ship, she kept a close eye on the core. Her instincts were telling her to be careful, but the rest of the crew wasn't listening. They were too busy mocking the old ship and laughing about how easy it would be to strip it for parts. What they didn't realize was that the warship was far from dead. And soon, they would discover that the forgotten ship still held incredible power, power that no alien had ever seen before. But for now, they continued their search, unaware that the moment they stepped into this ship, they had awakened something that was waiting to rise again. The alien crew continued their search of the forgotten warship. The corridors were still. The only sounds were the steady footsteps of their boots on the dusty floor and the occasional hum of equipment that was supposed to be dead. Zoreth led the way, his mind already focused on what they would take from the ship. The crew had found some interesting pieces of alien technology in the control room, but nothing that seemed truly valuable. To Zoreth, this mission was turning into a waste of time. "Commander," Lyra spoke up from behind, her voice tight. "I think we should look at the central engine room again. Something doesn't feel right." Zoreth stopped in his tracks, turning to look at her. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone impatient. "We've already seen it. The core is just an old power source. There's nothing here worth our time." Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I don't know. There's a strange energy around the ship, a pulse I can feel. It's like it's waiting." Zoreth didn't answer at first. His instincts told him to ignore her. After all, Lyra was young and had little experience compared to him. But her words nagged at him. The strange hum in the air, the silence that seemed to stretch on forever, and the way the ship had felt almost alive when they first entered. There was something off about this place, but he was the commander. He couldn't show weakness. "Stay focused," Zoreth ordered, waving her off. "We're taking what we can and leaving. No more distractions." Lyra didn't argue, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The others had already moved on, and the sound of their laughter echoed from further down the ship. They were still mocking the ancient technology, oblivious to the danger around them. As the crew split up and continued to search the ship, Zoreth turned back to the core room. He stood in front of the massive power source and stared at the glowing orb. There was no doubt that it was powerful. But what had once been a weapon of war now seemed more like an old battery, drained and forgotten. But then, as Zoreth stood there, a strange noise filled the air. It started as a low rumble, almost like a growl, coming from deep within the ship. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the walls. It was as though the ship was waking up, shaking off the dust of centuries. The lights flickered, and then suddenly, the entire ship hummed to life. Lyra, standing a few corridors away, heard it too. Her heart raced. She was right. The ship was coming back to life. She rushed toward the sound, her instincts screaming at her to find the others. Inside the core room, Zoreth felt the shift immediately. The power, which had seemed dormant just moments ago, surged forward. The ship's systems began to hum, lights flickering on in every corridor. The air became thick, alive with energy. It was as though the ship was breathing again, waking from a long slumber. "What is this?" Zoreth muttered to himself, stepping back as the ship's engines roared to life. He had seen old machines power up before, but this was different. This wasn't the simple awakening of old technology. This was something alive. The entire ship shuddered. The walls creaked as if the ship was stretching after a long nap. The humming grew louder, then stopped, replaced by a deep, resonant sound that seemed to come from the heart of the warship itself. Zoreth's eyes widened. Something was happening, something he couldn't control. The power source at the center of the room pulsed, brighter and stronger than ever before. It was no longer just a piece of old machinery. It was now a weapon, a force of nature that he didn't understand. "Commander," Lyra's voice echoed down the hallway. She had arrived, breathless and wide-eyed. "The ship, it's alive." Before Zoreth could respond, the lights in the hallway flickered again. And then the ship's AI came online. It had been dormant for centuries, its system locked away by time and neglect. But now it was awake. "Warning!" A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the ship. "Warning! Unauthorized entry detected. All systems activated. Defense mode engage. Zorath's heart skipped a beat. He tried to speak, to give an order, but the ship didn't care. The AI wasn't listening to him. The voice continued, louder now. Engaging defense protocols. All intruders will be neutralized. What? Zorath shouted, reaching for his communicator. He needed to call this fleet, but it was too late. The ship was already in control. It had awoken, and it was ready for battle. From the walls, hidden compartments opened. Massive weapons, long thought forgotten, slid out from their hidden places. Plasma cannons, energy shields, and missile launchers powered up. The ship was no longer a relic. It was a warship, ready for war again. Get out! Zorath yelled, but it was too late. The ship had already made its choice, and the first blast hit his ship before he could even react. The forgotten ship had awakened, and the aliens were about to learn the hard way that this warship was not a relic. It was a living nightmare. The blast echoed through the ship, shaking the very walls as it ripped through the air. Zorath's heart raced. His ship, the one he had come to rely on for years, was under attack. The shockwave knocked him off his feet. He hit the ground hard, his head spinning. The crew around him scrambled to find cover. What's happening? Zorath yelled, struggling to regain his balance. Lyra, who had been standing just behind him, managed to stay on her feet. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. Commander, the ship, it's fighting back, she gasped. Zorath struggled to his feet, his hands shaking. The ship's eye was no longer just a voice. It was alive, and it was using weapons far beyond what any of them had expected. The ancient warship wasn't just protecting itself. It was fighting like it had a purpose, and that purpose was to destroy. We have to get out of here, Zorath barked, rushing to the communication panel. He slammed his hand on it, hoping to call for backup. But nothing happened. The panel sparked and fizzled, its lights dimming. The ship had cut off all communication. They were alone. Lyra's eyes scanned the room in panic. The walls around them rumbled as another blast shook the ship. From the windows, they could see the distant stars outside, but the massive warship they had boarded was now a fortress, fortified, armed, and ready for battle. Commander, we can't fight it, Lyra said, her voice trembling. This ship, it's too powerful. We're not prepared for this. Zorath's mind raced. He had seen many battles, but this was something else. This wasn't just an old ship. This was a weapon, a hidden weapon that had been waiting for the right moment to unleash its power. And that moment was now. We can't leave, Zorath said, his voice low and determined. This warship, we have to figure out what it's hiding. Lyra looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? It's already attacking us. Zorath's eyes narrowed as he slowly approached the center of the ship again, toward the core. The power was surging stronger than ever before, pulsing in the walls and the air. It was like the ship was breathing with life. He had to know more about this weapon, why it was so powerful, and what it was really capable of. He stepped into the core room, where the massive, glowing orb still sat, surrounded by machinery. The air felt electric, alive with power. The AI's cold voice echoed through the room, its warning now a constant hum in the background. Warning: unauthorized entry detected. Defense systems engage. All intruders will be neutralized. Zorath ignored the warning. He reached out, placing his hand on the surface of the glowing orb. It was warm, almost too warm. As his hand touched the surface, the orb flared, its light intensifying. The ship trembled beneath him. Commander, what are you doing? Lyra called from the doorway. Her voice was filled with fear, but Zorath didn't turn. His focus was entirely on the orb. The ship responded. The core hummed louder, and the walls around them shifted. Zorath felt the temperature rise as the power coursed through the ship. Suddenly, a loud mechanical whirring sound filled the room, and the floor beneath them began to shake. It was as if the ship was preparing to reveal something it had kept hidden for centuries. Zorath backed away from the orb, his heart pounding in his chest. Lyra, something's happening. This ship, it's more than just a warship. It's a weapon of mass destruction. Just as he spoke, a massive door at the far side of the room slid open with a heavy clank. Beyond it, the crew could see a dark hallway, stretching deep into the bowels of the ship. But there was something else, a faint blue glow at the end of the hallway, flickering like a fire. Lyra stepped forward, eyes wide. Is that a weapon? Zorath nodded. It has to be. They moved quickly down the hallway, their boots echoing on the metal floor. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the ship. The blue glow ahead of them grew brighter, and soon they reached the source. What they found was beyond anything they had ever seen. It was a massive cannon, much larger than anything the alien fleet had ever created. It was built into the very heart of the ship, a weapon that could wipe out entire planets with a single blast. The weapon was connected to the ship's core, drawing all of its power into it. Unbelievable, Zorath whispered, staring in awe at the weapon. This ship, it wasn't just a warship. It was a weapon of total destruction. Lyra stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch the weapon. How did the humans make this? How did they hide it? Zorath didn't answer. He was too busy thinking about the power they had just uncovered. This weapon, hidden for centuries, was now fully awake. And it had one purpose: to destroy everything in its path. Zorath realized something. The ship hadn't just been waiting to defend itself. It had been waiting for someone, anyone, to come close enough to activate it. The humans had built it, hidden it, and forgotten it. But now it was fully awake, and it was ready to fight. We need to get out of here, Zorath said urgently. This ship isn't just a relic. It's a hidden weapon, and we just unlocked it. But as they turned to leave, the AI's voice cut through the room again. Warning: all intruders will be neutralized. The ship was alive, and it was going to make sure they never left. The air was thick with tension as Zorath and Lyra stood before the massive weapon, their eyes locked on the deadly cannon that had just been revealed. The room around them hummed with energy, the power from the core flowing into the weapon, charging it for what was about to come. The ship, alive and full of hidden secrets, was no longer a derelict ruin. It had become a fortress, and they were trapped inside. We need to move. Now, Zorath said, his voice low but urgent. His mind raced as he realized the full scale of the threat they were facing. The ship had more than just a powerful weapon. It had the means to use it. Lyra didn't need to be told twice. Her heart pounded as they turned and ran back down the dark corridor, toward the room where they had first encountered the core. The floor trembled beneath their feet, as if the ship itself was preparing for battle. But what were they up against? And why had the ship woken up now, after all these years? Suddenly, the air around them seemed to change. The lights flickered as if the ship was taking a deep breath. Then came the low, deep rumble of engines coming online. Zorath's stomach dropped. The ship wasn't just waking up, it was mobilizing. And it wasn't going to let them escape. "Commander," Lyra shouted, her voice full of fear, "we're not going to make it. The ship is turning against us." Zorath gritted his teeth. "Stay focused, Lyra. We can't let fear control us. We need to fight back. If we don't stop this ship now, it will destroy everything." The sound of alarms blared through the ship. The AI's voice rang out, cold and emotionless. "Warning: unauthorized intruders detected. Engaging all defense systems. No escape permitted." Zorath's heart raced as he reached for his communicator again. This time, it worked. He quickly sent a distress signal to the fleet. "This is Commander Zorath. We're under attack by an unknown weapon. We need backup immediately." But even as he spoke, he knew it might be too late. The ship had already locked them in, its weapons powered up and ready. There was no telling how much time they had before it was too late. Suddenly, A massive explosion rocked the ship. Zorath and Lyra were thrown to the ground as the entire corridor shook with the force of the blast. The walls cracked and sparks flew from the ceiling. The warship's defense systems had come online. The battle had begun. Zorath quickly scrambled to his feet, pulling Lyra up with him. They had no time to waste. The ship was about to unleash its full power, and they were still deep within its heart. They had to escape before it was too late. The walls around them began to pulse with a strange blue light. The ship's defenses were preparing to fire. The low hum of energy filled the air, growing louder by the second. And then, with a deafening roar, a powerful blast shot out from the ship's cannons, smashing through the metal walls like paper. The shockwave sent them both sprawling again. "Get up," Zorath shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm. "We're running out of time." They ran, dodging debris as more blasts echoed through the ship. The walls were crumbling, the floor shaking beneath them. It was as if the entire ship was tearing itself apart in an effort to destroy them. The glowing lights that had once seemed so peaceful now felt like the eyes of a predator, watching their every move. As they reached the hallway leading to the exit, the walls suddenly closed in. Massive metal doors slammed down, blocking their path. They were trapped again. "Commander, we can't keep running," Lyra gasped, out of breath. "We need to stop this ship from firing. If it keeps attacking, we won't last long." Zorath clenched his fists. He was running out of options. The power in the ship was overwhelming. The AI had full control, and it had one goal: to eliminate them. The cannon was just the beginning. He could feel the intensity of the energy building, knowing that one more blast could tear apart everything in its path. Then, as if by instinct, Zorath turned and ran toward the central core again. "I have an idea," he said, his voice tight with determination. Lyra hesitated but followed him without question. They reached the core room, and the giant orb still pulsed, its power building with each passing second. The ship was preparing for another attack. "We need to turn off the core's power," Zorath said, scanning the room for anything that might help. "If we can cut the power to the cannons, we might be able to disable the defenses." Lyra nodded, but she was clearly unsure. "How do we do that? We don't even know how this ship works." Zorath's eyes darted across the room, searching for any clue. Then his gaze landed on a control panel near the base of the core. He ran to it and began to work, pressing buttons and flipping switches, trying to understand the ship's ancient technology. As he worked, the AI's voice rang out again, colder than ever. "Warning. Intruders detected in core room. Defense systems will engage within seconds." Zorath's hands moved faster, his heart racing as the countdown to destruction ticked away. He knew they were running out of time. But if he could just... Suddenly, the room was filled with a deafening roar. The ship's main cannon fired again, and the entire warship shook. Zorath's fingers hit the final switch just as the room was flooded with a brilliant blue light. The ship's core room was filled with an eerie silence as Zorath and Lyra caught their breath. The intense light from the cannon had faded, but the vibrations of the warship still hummed through the floor beneath them. They had narrowly escaped the blast, but the danger was far from over. The power they had hoped to shut down was still running, and the ship was still alive. Its weapon systems were waiting for the next moment to strike. "Commander, we're running out of time," Lyra said, her voice shaky but urgent. "We have to finish what we started." Zorath wiped the sweat from his forehead, his mind racing. He had managed to disable some of the ship's weapon systems, but the main cannon was still active. It was powerful, ancient, and dangerous, and they were running out of ideas. As they stared at the dark control panels, a soft, mechanical hum echoed through the room. It was faint at first, barely noticeable above the noise of the ship, but soon it grew louder, more pronounced. The lights flickered once again, and the ship seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Lyra stepped back, her hand on her blaster. "What's happening? Is the ship activating again?" Zorath didn't answer at first. He was staring at the walls of the core room. Something had changed. The hum had a rhythm now, almost like it was trying to communicate. "Stay close," Zorath whispered. He began to move toward one of the walls. His eyes narrowed. The vibrations seemed to be coming from behind a panel near the far end of the room. It was hidden, tucked away beneath layers of rust and metal. As he approached, the hum grew louder, vibrating the air. Lyra followed him cautiously, her footsteps slow and careful. "Commander, what is it?" Without answering, Zorath reached out and gently pressed a panel on the wall. There was a soft click, and the metal began to slide open. Behind it was a small, glowing device. It was an old relic, one unlike anything they had seen before. Its surface was covered in intricate designs, glowing softly in a blue hue. Zorath's hand hovered over it for a moment before he touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, the device sparked to life, and a hologram flickered to life in the air above them. Both Zorath and Lyra stepped back in surprise, their eyes wide. The hologram was a projection of a human, a man, dressed in what looked like old military gear. His face was stern, but there was a sadness in his eyes, as though he had seen too much war. The man began to speak, his voice low and filled with regret. "If you are seeing this message, it means the warship has been awakened. You are standing inside a weapon built by humanity, built for the sole purpose of protecting our world from enemies who would stop at nothing to destroy us." Zorath's breath caught in his throat. The human man on the hologram continued, his expression grave. "We knew the warship would one day be forgotten. We knew it would one day be lost to time. But we never imagined that the enemy would find it before we could destroy it. If you are hearing this message, then you are too late. The warship's defenses have been activated, and it will stop at nothing to protect itself. It will not listen to reason. It will not allow anyone to escape, and it will destroy everything in its path." The man's image flickered slightly, as though the device was on the brink of losing power. "But there is hope," he said urgently, his voice rising. "There is a failsafe. You must find the core's control room. In it, there is a key, an ancient key that will allow you to stop the warship's power. Without it, the ship will continue its destruction until it burns out. But with it, you can shut it down. Do not let the ship escape. Do not let it destroy everything we built." The hologram flickered one last time, its image distorting before it vanished entirely, leaving only the soft blue glow of the device. Zorath stood frozen, staring at the spot where the hologram had been. The words of the human soldier echoed in his mind. A failsafe, a key. That was their only hope. Lyra broke the silence, her voice filled with disbelief. "So, this ship was built by humans. And it's not just a weapon, it's a failsafe." Zorath nodded slowly, his mind working through the information. Yes, the ship was never meant to be a weapon for war. It was built to protect, to stop an enemy before they could destroy everything humanity had worked for. But in doing so, it became a weapon too powerful for its own good. He turned to Lyra, his eyes filled with determination. "We have to find that key. If we don't, this ship will destroy everything. We can't let that happen." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "Where do we find it?" Zorath glanced around the room, searching for any clue that might point them in the right direction. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, and there were control panels that looked like they hadn't been touched in centuries. But one thing stood out. Near the far side of the room was a pedestal, its surface glowing faintly. "Over there," Zorath said. "It must be the control room the message mentioned. Let's go." They hurried toward the pedestal, their footsteps quick and purposeful. As they reached it, Zorath's hand brushed against the surface. The pedestal responded to his touch, and a small compartment opened, revealing a key, the ancient key the human soldier had spoken of. Zorath held it up, his grip tight. This was their chance. The key could stop the warship. It could end the threat that humanity had built so long ago. But as Zorath reached for it, The ship's eye spoke again, cold and threatening. Intruders detected. Defense systems will engage. The battle wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. The ship trembled with the force of the eye's command. The deep, cold voice echoed through the hallways, sending a shiver down Zoreth's spine. The walls, once silent and still, now hummed with the rising power of the warship's defenses. Every corner of the massive vessel seemed to come alive, as though the ship itself was preparing for the final battle. Zoreth clenched his fists, holding the ancient key tightly in his hand. He glanced at Lyra, her face pale but determined. They had come so far, but now the true challenge was ahead of them. They had the key, but they still had to make it to the central control room and use it before the ship destroyed everything in its path. "We can't waste any more time," Zoreth said, his voice hard with resolve. "We need to get to the control room and stop this warship now." Lyra nodded, her hand on her blaster as she scanned the hallway. "I agree, but the ship's defenses are coming online. We won't make it unless we move fast." With the key in hand, they moved quickly, darting through the dark, twisting corridors of the ship. The lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows along the walls. The sounds of the ship's systems coming to life grew louder, the hum of energy vibrating through the floor. It felt as though the warship was a living creature, one that was aware of their every move, calculating its next strike. Zoreth and Lyra reached a junction where the hallway split in two directions. They paused for a moment, listening. The air was thick with tension, and every footstep felt like it echoed through the entire ship. "Which way?" Lyra asked, her voice tense. Zoreth studied the map on his wrist console. "This way," he said, pointing to the left. "The central control room should be through here." They moved again, their footsteps quick and quiet. But even in their haste, the ship seemed to know they were coming. The walls began to glow with a fierce, red light, and suddenly, blast doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them in a hallway filled with dark, buzzing lights. "Move!" Zoreth shouted, grabbing Lyra's arm. The air around them crackled with energy as the ship's defenses engaged. The floor beneath them rumbled, and the walls vibrated with the power building within the warship. A blast of energy shot from the ceiling, narrowly missing them. The force of it shook the floor, sending debris flying in every direction. Zoreth and Lyra dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the explosion that tore through the air where they had just been standing. "That was too close," Lyra gasped, her heart pounding. "We have to hurry." Zoreth didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled to their feet, their movements quick and desperate. The ship was fighting back harder now, its defense systems relentless. The floor beneath them shook again, and they could hear the loud mechanical whirring of weapons charging up. "We need to get to the control room," Zoreth shouted again, his voice steady despite the panic that was beginning to build within him. They sprinted down the hallway, their breaths coming faster. They had to keep moving. They had no choice. The ship was too powerful, and time was running out. Every step they took felt like a countdown to disaster. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a massive set of blast doors. The doors were solid, towering, and unyielding. The central control room was on the other side, but the ship had locked them out. The only way forward was to get through those doors. Without hesitating, Zoreth approached the doors, pulling the ancient key from his belt. He placed it into a small, hidden slot near the base of the door. The key sparked to life, glowing a brilliant blue as it connected with the ship's systems. For a moment, nothing happened. "Come on," Zoreth muttered, the tension growing. He could hear the eye's voice echoing through the ship again, colder and more threatening. "Warning! Intruders in control room vicinity. Activating final defense protocols." Suddenly, the doors began to hum, and the sound of metal grinding filled the air. Slowly, painfully, the massive doors began to slide open, revealing the heart of the ship. The control room was vast, filled with glowing panels and consoles that hummed with energy. It was the place where all the power of the warship flowed, and it was their last chance to stop it. But as they stepped inside, a new sound filled the room. It was low, almost like a growl, and it seemed to vibrate the very walls around them. The eye was there, its presence almost physical. Zorath could feel the ship's will pressing against him, trying to force him to turn back. He knew that this was the point of no return. "You will not stop me," the AI's voice echoed, as cold as ice. "You are insignificant. I am the protector of humanity's legacy. You cannot control me." Zorath's grip tightened around the key. He could feel the weight of it in his hand. The power to stop everything, to end the threat, but only if he was willing to face it. He knew that they were up against something beyond anything they had ever imagined. The ship was not just a weapon. It was a symbol, a testament to the power and fear that humanity had once commanded. But it had gone too far. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "We will stop you," she said, her voice steady. "This ship was built to protect humanity, but you've become something else, something dangerous. We're here to end it." Zorath nodded, his resolve hardening. This wasn't just about stopping a weapon. It was about respect. Respect for what humanity had built, but also for the need to put an end to it before it consumed everything. The AI's voice crackled in the air. "You think you can defeat me? I am the last defense. I am the final legacy. You will fail." But Zorath's hand was already moving, placing the key into the control panel. And as he did, the ship groaned. It wasn't a sound of power, but one of surrender. The battle had come to an end, and they had won.